Welcome everyone to a LuchaWorld news update. Fredo Esparza here, and today we are going to talk about the CMLL Homenaje a Dos Leyendas lineup that was announced this past Wednesday during a press conference. They also announced the legend that will be honored on that show. What they did not announce was that they did not announce whether or not this show would be streaming live. Usually these shows do not get streamed live. They will usually upload them later in the evening, right, like about an hour after the show ends. It should be up there on on CMLL's YouTube channel. They didn't in the past they've done pay-per-views, but honestly, with it being CMLL, you never know what they're gonna do. If they don't announce anything about it streaming live, odds are it's just going to be posted later in the evening after the show is over, late evening. But you know the card itself isn't that strong this year, so I don't think a lot of us are going to be like really that worried if we watch it live or if we watch it later as it was recorded, because there's a lot of stuff on here that's very repetitive, which has been something very typical of CMLL the past 2 years, unfortunately. And it keeps getting worse because, unfortunately, one of the other problems with CMLL is that they're losing talent on pretty much every year. They've lost at least 3 or 4 guys, not just at the headliner level, but guys lower in the card. They probably lose more than that because they do have guys who actually show up for a couple of shows, figure it out that they're not going to be pushed any higher, or there's not that much interest in them, so they end up leaving. In the past, they've had guys come in and work. Well, actually, not really, because even last year they kind of teased a couple of people working the show, and they ended up not having them. And this year, they only have one guy who's not a regular that will be on the card. We'll talk about the lineup, but before we get to the lineup, the legend that will be honored along with Salvador Luteroth, it will be Sangre Chicana, who was a huge star in the 70s and 80s, and by the 90s, he kind of was more of a veteran wrestler who was just a name that was being brought into AAA and also CMLL and the independents. But really, his star power was really the late 70s throughout the 80s. One of the top stars in Lucha Libre. I was going through some magazines, and I think it was in 1977 or 1979. There was a magazine article that had a debate as to who was the best wrestler in Mexico at that point in time. And the debate consisted of 3 wrestlers, those being El Canec, Paraguayo, and Sangre Chicana. And each guy, they had a little profile on each guy and why they probably were the top guy at that time and why the other guy was. But very interesting. But that kind of tells you the star power he was. Really one of the top brawlers of all time, and not just Lucha Libre and pro wrestling. That's really where he's known more for, because of the brawls he had with guys like MS1, Paraguayo, El Satánico. The list goes on and on. Later in his career with heavy metal, just a variety of guys over the years. Definitely a top star. And it was interesting. They were talking to him on CML Informa, and he said one of the things he wanted was that he wanted all his kids to be in attendance when he's being honored, which included Sangre Imperial, I think Sangre Chicana Jr., another daughter, Lluvia, obviously from CMLL. Sangre Imperial is also in CMLL. For those of you who don't watch the non-Friday shows, he usually shows up on those shows. But two of his kids are in CMLL. I think he might have another relative that was also part of CMLL. And also he mentioned La Hiedra, which was brought up in CML Informa. And it was funny because usually they don't want you to bring up AAA people. And but it will be very interesting if she's actually permitted to be in attendance for that. I would guess probably not. But you never know with CMLL, especially the last couple of weeks when they actually brought up La Parca's passing, someone who never wrestled in their promotion. This, of course, being the La Parca, the second version with AAA, not LA Park. But Sangre Chicana is being honored. That during that week, they also do Dos Leyendas shows in Puebla and Guadalajara. And the Puebla show, they will be honoring Arturo Casco La Fiera, who was another big star in the 80s and all the way through the mid 90s. and he still was pretty prominent up until I think 98, 99. And unfortunately, he died. He passed away at a very young age, in his 40s. And being honored in Guadalajara will be Gran Cochise, who was another wrestler who was a star in the 80s. And he is currently the head booker, head of the programming department in Guadalajara, as well as the head trainer in that building for CMLL. So they're doing three Dos Leyendas shows, but the big one is really the Friday Dos Leyendas show on March 20th. They announced the lineup. What CML usually does is they announce maybe 4 or 5 matches during the press conference. Then they do a teaser for another big match to be announced for Informa. Why they do that is beyond me. You want to reveal the entire lineup during the press conference when you actually have all the media there, and more people are actually watching it. I get that they want to have it on Informa, but there really isn't, other than myself and maybe like the thousand or so that actually watch that show. Some of them I don't even think watch it live. I'm sure they're just tuning in and out during the show. It's probably better to do it during a more viewed moment and in front of the media that's actually going to be writing about this show. So the first match will be the Microman, El Gallito, and Atomo versus Chamuel, El Guapito, and Perico Zacarias. I think the problem now is that we've seen these guys wrestle so many matches that, honestly, if it's not Microman and Chamuel that are really pulling off their really good work in the match, then you pretty much know the rest of it is not going to be that good. So, it's pretty much the same match over and over again, unfortunately. But at least we get Microman on this show. It's a good thing. But I think, honestly, I think one of the things with CML is that they really could use like a tag match between these guys, and that's really when it was strong. When the micros were really at a more interesting level was when they would just go to tag matches. But now since they have a division, they have 6 or 7 of them when Mija's around, plus Micro Angel, who's usually the referee. Now they have to actually do this stuff more frequently. And unfortunately, other than Chamuel and Microman and Gallito a bit, everybody else isn't that good in the ring. They try, but it's like you can't really expect more out of them. The second match is Diamante Azul, Titan, Stuka Jr. versus Mephisto, Nero Casas, and El Terrible. Really, that comes across like any typical random trios match that we've seen on Friday shows. I don't know. It should be entertaining with Titan and Casas and Terrible, but I'm not really expecting much from this match. Pretty much what you would expect from a. I would expect their high end would be a good Friday match, and their low end probably being your usual, what we see all the time. The third match will be Angel de Oro and Niebla Roja teaming up with Flip Gordon versus NGD, Sanson, Cuatrero, and Forastero. I think this is probably going to be the best match on the card as far as depending really also on what the technicals do, because I think NGD's kind of fallen into that trap of just, they pretty much do the same thing over and over again. Unfortunately they also work a lot against the same guys over and over again. So, but I think it's still going to be a good match. This is the type of match that's going to entertain the crowd that is probably going to attend this show. And I would expect this to be a good crowd as far as attendance. I expect it to be a good attendance just because it's Dos Leyendas and they do draw well on Fridays. But this match, I think if you're somebody who watches CML on a regular basis, you're just going to see it as something you've already seen, and you're just going to hope it's a good match and that's it. While somebody who only casually watches or is a tourist is probably going to be very entertained by this match. The fourth match was announced on CML Informa, and during the press conference they said it was going to be an apuestas match, and I think everybody was really confused because they were wondering what other feud was going on where they could put a mask or hair on the line. It turns out it's not that. It's going to be Dallas versus Princesa Suhei, with Dallas defending the CMLL Ladies Ring title, the championship that she won in Japan, and is part of the Japan version, the group out in Japan where they're, I guess it's more of a title that's now going to be part of CMLL as well. I don't expect this match to be very good. I could see it's. I think it's going to be better than anything that went on with Dallas last year with La Metallica and some of the other matches she had. But I don't expect this to be anything that different or earth shattering or anything. Really, I think Dallas is very limited in the ring. She kind of sticks to what she does and doesn't really deviate or change what she's going to do in the ring. So I don't expect anything different from this match. And Suhei, I think she's kind of had her best moments in the past. I think her big moment was really several years ago when she had the mask match. And by that point, she was even already starting to slow down a bit. I don't expect much from that match. The fifth match, and probably the match that should also be really good, is the Guerreros Laguneros, Ultimo Guerrero, Gran Guerrero, and Euphoria defending the CML World Trios titles against, you guessed it, another version of Sky Team. This time, Caristico, Volador Jr., and Valiente, or as like most of us like to call them, Sky Team version 2, because there are basically about 6 or 7 or 8 different Sky Team versions, and really the most prominent one obviously being Volador Jr., Mystico, Valiente, and then when they go to the version 2, it's basically just Caristico replacing Mystico. Version 3 is basically getting rid of Valiente and adding Mystico. That's really... And then I think the fourth version would be just without Volador Jr. But, this should be a good match, but it's something we've already seen a lot of, and I don't know if there's a lot of people that are really dying to see this match. It's unfortunate because I think a lot of these matches, like this, the two trios matches, that the NGD match and then this match, I think a lot of people would be really interested in this match if they just didn't do it so frequently. And I mean, honestly, if they just made one change, unfortunately they didn't, and it's the same thing. So, we're going with that. The main event, the sixth match on the card, will be Barbaro Carbonario versus Felino in a hair match. Again, I think this should be a good match just because I think Carbonario can carry pretty much anybody, and I think Felino isn't at that level where he's not like totally like awful. He's still capable of doing certain things, but I think it's probably going to be on the low end of good, probably like a 3-star match. I don't expect anything higher than that from this main event, but I think the crowd is going to... I think what's going to really help this is that the crowd's going to be really into this, because the last match that they had was did get a lot of heat. It wasn't that good though, but this one should be a little bit stronger, especially because Carbonario is going to want to do a little bit more and he wants to be the main guy in CMLL. I think the reality with Dragon Lee and Roosh leaving, that leaves a big void in CMLL behind Ultimo Guerrero and Volador Jr., Negro Casas, guys like that. You need that young guy that's the next guy who's going to be the star of the promotion. I think Carbonario can take that spot, and he kind of sees this as the opportunity to take that spot. They've done a good job of building up their rivalry in a short period, and they're still going to have a little bit more time, about a month longer, to build it up. But they've done a really solid job of going from Peste Negra ending because of Mr. Niebla's passing, and it going from Carver, and they've done it really well in post-match interviews and in other interviews where Barbaro Carbonario has talked about how Felino really didn't help him, and he really wasn't even around for Peste Negra, and he brought up how Felino started showering and wasn't even being as smelly as the other guys. And then they also talked about Nero Casas, and Felino's been more about how Carbonario is biting the hand that helped him, and not just Mr. Niebla, but the Casas brothers, and also even Zacharias at Perico, where he's brought up how Perico Zacharias was the one that brought him into the faction, back when he brought in Herodes and him, which was a long time ago. This was back when CML actually did one skit, and that was the skit where they introduced the 2 new members of Peste Negra. Mr. Niebla was hanging out in a junkyard, probably the junkyard where they record Zona 23, or they run shows in Zona 23. So you had Perico Zacarias marching into the junkyard, and he brought in Carbonario and Herodes Jr. as the two new recruits. Herodes Jr. didn't stick for very long. Carbonario did, and Carbonario has really blossomed into a superstar in CMLL and one of the top workers in Mexico. Not just in Mexico, really in the world, just because he has some really good singles matches. He's one of the few guys who's very reliable as far as having good matches in CMLL. And so I would expect this to be at least a good match. Some people are very underwhelmed with this match, and I totally understand, because I think one of the problems with CMLL is that they still see a lot of value in the veteran wrestlers, and them losing to a younger guy. Unfortunately, I think Felino isn't that like big star that you think, oh my God, this Carbonario is going to be Felino. Now he's set as a superstar. That's not really, Felino's not that level of, at that level. He's more of a upper mid card guy who is, peaked at that point. But I think there's a possibility that if they continue this feud, maybe he gets Casas down the road. They talked about a retirement match, and I hope that doesn't happen. I know Felino said that he thinks that's really not a direction they should go, just because Negro Casas is still really good, and I agree with him on that on his thinking. But also Negro Casas is 60 years old, and I don't know, he looks like he could still go for another 5 years, so 10 years, but they got to get something out of it while Carvonario's young, and Casas still has some ability to do something to get somebody into that next level of star. But yeah, that's the entire card. A lot of people are very underwhelmed. I would agree with them. I think CML could have done a better job. You don't have Soberano Jr., Hechicero on this card. You don't really, like, a lot of the trios matches don't really, I don't know, like the micros, I think they've kind of lost a little bit of their luster just because they've been on so many shows. And then that second match really just screams, typical, I think they need a tag match. Honestly, I think they should have gone with a tag match somewhere in between, just because I think the fact that they don't do tag matches that frequently, although to be granted, they're doing two tag team tournaments. That's the other thing that came out in the press conference. They announced that they were bringing back the Mexican national tag team titles, and I don't think CML needs more tag team titles or titles at all. I just think going from this tournament that they're starting up just that they just started with the Torneo Increíbles de Parejas, and then going into the national tag team tournament, it's just a little bit of an overload. But I think what they should have done is they really should have done the Mexican national tag team title finals as part of Dos Leyendas, and they could have planned it that way properly, and it would have worked perfectly. That should have been like the fourth match instead of Dallas versus Princesa Suhei. I don't think anybody really cares about that match, and I mean, I know Dallas is, got very emotional about and how honored she was for that being in that match. But honestly, I think she's had a lot of opportunities to be in big shows, and it's just not working. But unfortunately, this current people running CML don't see that, don't realize it, and But like I said, the tag tournament, I think the tag title should have been the other match in this. I think that would have been a little bit of a different situation. Granted, they couldn't. I don't know. I don't think we could actually think. We can't really believe in CML actually planning a tournament to end in a way where whoever's in the tournament isn't already in one of these matches that they would have announced by now. I would be worried about that, but that could have been resolved later on. I just think that was something they should have considered doing. But yeah, that's the show. It'll be, like I said, Dos Leyendas, March 20th. We don't know if it will be streamed live. So thanks again for listening, and we will be back again soon.